You're not hated because you're wrong. You're hated because you're right, and that's unbearable. Ever notice how the sharper you get, the smaller your circle becomes? It's not coincidence. It's design. Intelligence doesn't just make you different. It makes you dangerous. Not because you're smarter, because you expose what people spend their entire lives hiding, their contradictions, their weaknesses, their carefully constructed illusions. And the brain doesn't forgive that. It retaliates. Most people think isolation is a social problem. It's not. It's neurological. It's psychological. It's evolutionary. Your mind triggers threat responses in others without you even speaking. You walk into a room and the power structure shifts. You ask one question and the consensus fractures. You refuse to nod along and suddenly you're the problem. Not because you did anything wrong, because you refuse to pretend. This isn't about being misunderstood. This is about being feared. And if you've ever felt like the world punishes you for thinking clearly, you're about to understand why. There are 20 mechanisms, neurological, social, evolutionary, that explain exactly why smart minds terrify the masses. And once you see them, you'll stop apologizing for your intelligence and start wielding it like the weapon it is. Let's begin. You don't scare people because you're smarter. You scare them because you reflect what they refuse to see in themselves. Intelligence isn't just knowledge. It's a mirror held up to mediocrity. When you speak with clarity, you expose the gaps in their logic, the holes in their stories, the weakness in their beliefs, and people hate mirrors. They'd rather live in the fog than face what's staring back at them. Your presence alone becomes a reminder of everything they're not. Most people build their entire identity on comforting lies. They believe they're rational, moral, competent, until someone like you walks in and dismantles that illusion without even trying. You don't need to attack. Your existence is the attack. Every sharp observation, every precise question, every refusal to nod along, it all chips away at the fantasy they've built to survive. They feel exposed, naked, and that triggers something primal, the need to destroy the mirror before it reveals more. This isn't about you being arrogant. It's about them being fragile. The world rewards those who validate delusions, not those who shatter them. When you operate with intellectual honesty, you become a walking threat to every comfortable narrative around you. People don't fear your intelligence. They fear the discomfort it forces them to feel. They fear the cognitive effort required to keep up. They fear being compared, being measured, being found lacking. So they do what weak minds always do. They label you cold, arrogant, difficult. They turn their insecurity into your flaw. And the more you refuse to dull yourself for their comfort, the more dangerous you become in their eyes. But here's what they don't tell you. This reaction isn't random. It's wired into how the brain processes conflict between what it believes and what it's being shown. Cognitive dissonance is the mental war that happens when reality doesn't match belief. When you present logic that contradicts someone's worldview, their brain doesn't process it as information, it processes it as an attack. You're not offering clarity, you're threatening survival. Because most people don't build their identity on truth, they build it on stories that make them feel safe, competent, in control. And when you walk in with a sharper perspective, you force them into a choice: adapt or reject. Guess which one takes less effort? The brain hates discomfort more than it loves truth. When your words create tension between what they believe and what they now see, the easiest path is to dismiss you entirely. Not your argument, you. It's not logical, but it's efficient. They'll twist your words, attack your tone, question your motives, anything to avoid the real issue. They might be wrong, I've watched people abandon entire friendships rather than admit a single flawed assumption. That's not weakness. That's the brain choosing emotional stability over intellectual honesty. And you become the enemy simply for existing in that equation. This is why intelligence isolates. You're not just offering a different opinion. You're triggering psychological friction that most people aren't equipped to handle. Every time you speak with precision, you're asking them to confront the gap between their constructed reality and what actually is. Most won't do it. They'll retreat into defensiveness, aggression, or silent resentment. You'll be labeled difficult, cold, overthinking. But the truth is simpler. You refuse to play along with the illusion. And illusions require consensus to survive. What you're really doing is forcing a confrontation between two versions of the world, and only one can win in their mind. People don't just fear your intelligence, they fear what it says about them. Every human builds a self-concept, a mental picture of who they are, how capable they are, where they stand in the hierarchy. That self-concept is fragile. It's held together by selective memory, social validation, and carefully avoided truths. When you show up with sharper thinking, faster pattern recognition, or deeper insight, you don't just challenge their ideas, you challenge their entire sense of self, and the brain treats that like a survival threat. You've seen it happen. Someone presents an idea. You point out the flaw, not with cruelty, just with clarity. And suddenly the temperature drops. Their body language shifts. They stop listening and start defending, because in that moment, you're not correcting their logic. You're dismantling their identity. They've tied their self-worth to being smart, competent, respected. And your presence makes them feel small. Not because you intended it, because comparison is automatic. The brain doesn't ask permission. It measures, ranks, and reacts. And when it senses inferiority, it doesn't choose growth. It chooses rejection. This is why intelligence triggers hostility faster than almost anything else. You can be kind, generous, empathetic, but if you're sharper, you're still a threat. Because you represent what they're not. And most people would rather destroy the reminder than confront the gap. They'll call you arrogant, condescending, out of touch. They'll reframe your competence as a personality flaw. It's not about you anymore. It's about protecting the version of themselves they need to believe in. And if that means erasing you from the equation, they will. But this isn't just psychological theater. There's a deeper mechanism at play, one rooted in how the brain itself processes threat and dominance. The brain has two operating systems. One thinks, one reacts. And in moments of perceived threat, the one that reacts always wins. When you present logic that challenges someone, their prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for reason, analysis, control, should engage. But it doesn't. Instead, the amygdala fires first. That's the emotional brain, the survival brain. It doesn't care about truth, it cares about safety. And in that split second, your intelligence registers as danger. Not because of what you said, because of what it triggered. You're not having a rational conversation. You're triggering a threat response. The amygdala floods the system with cortisol and adrenaline. Heart rate spikes. Thought narrows. The person in front of you isn't thinking anymore, they're defending. And once that emotional hijacking happens, logic is irrelevant. You could present flawless reasoning, cite every source, stay calm and measured. It won't matter, because their brain isn't processing your words as information, it's processing them as an attack. And attacks demand immediate instinctive response. Fight, flight, or freeze, usually fight. This is why intelligent people lose arguments they should win. You're operating from the rational brain. They're operating from the emotional one. And emotion is faster, louder, more convincing to an audience. They'll raise their voice, appeal to feelings, reframe the conversation around tone instead of content. And it works. Because most people aren't listening to logic, they're reading energy. Your calm precision feels cold. Their emotional intensity feels real. So they win the room, even when they're wrong. And you walk away wondering why truth didn't matter. It's because survival instinct doesn't care about truth. It cares about dominance. This reaction isn't abstract. It's neurological. And the way the brain identifies you as a threat runs even deeper than emotion. The brain is a hierarchy mapping machine. It's constantly scanning for signals of power, status, dominance. And intelligence is one of the strongest dominant signals in human interaction. When you demonstrate superior reasoning, faster pattern recognition, or deeper insight, the brain doesn't register it as neutral information. It registers it as a status threat. You've just climbed higher on the invisible ladder. And that triggers the same neural circuits that respond to physical intimidation. Your words become a weapon. Your clarity becomes aggression. Not because you intended it that way, because that's how the brain interprets power. This happens below conscious awareness. The person you're speaking to might not even realize why they feel defensive, irritated, or threatened. But their nervous system knows. The insula activates, responsible for disgust and aversion. The anterior cingulate cortex lights up, monitoring for social conflict. The brain is essentially preparing for battle, and the battlefield is dominance. Every sharp observation you make, every flaw you expose, every question they can't answer, it all registers as a loss of control. And the brain hates losing control, so it retaliates. Through dismissal, mockery, avoidance, hostility, anything to regain the upper hand. You're not just smarter, you're perceived as more dangerous, and danger demands suppression. This is why groups will tolerate the loud, the emotional, the charismatic, but reject the quietly intelligent. Because intelligence is harder to manipulate, harder to predict, harder to dominate. It signals independence, and independence threatens hierarchy. The brain reads you as someone who doesn't need the group's approval to function, and that makes you unpredictable. Unpredictability is power, and power that doesn't submit gets isolated, attacked, or expelled. But this neurological response doesn't just affect individuals. It shapes entire group structures, and that's where intelligence becomes a collective threat. Groups survive on consensus, not truth, not logic, consensus. When everyone agrees on the same comfortable narratives, the group feels stable, unified, safe. Intelligence disrupts that. You ask the questions no one wants to answer. You challenge the assumptions everyone pretends are facts. You expose the contradictions they've all silently agreed to ignore. And in doing so, you become a threat to the entire structure. Not because you're wrong, because you're right. And being right in a group built on shared delusions makes you the enemy. The moment you introduce complexity into a conversation that thrives on simplicity, you fracture cohesion. People stop nodding. The energy shifts. Suddenly they have to think. They have to reconsider. They have to confront the possibility that the group consensus might be flawed, and most won't do it. Because belonging feels better than being correct. The brain prioritizes social survival over intellectual honesty. So instead of questioning the narrative, they question you. You're too critical, too intense, too much. They'll protect the group's illusion before they protect the truth, and you'll be sacrificed to maintain that comfort. This is why workplaces, friendships, even families will quietly push out the person who thinks too deeply. You're not disruptive because you're difficult. You're disruptive because you force people to see what they've been avoiding. You expose the laziness, the contradictions, the unspoken agreements that keep the peace. And peace, in most groups, is more valuable than progress. They'll choose comfort over growth every time. And if you won't conform to that comfort, you'll be removed. Not loudly, just slowly, through exclusion, dismissal, or silent consensus that you no longer fit. But this rejection isn't just about group comfort. It's about something deeper, something evolutionary that punishes those who refuse to blend in. Humans are tribal by design. Your ancestors survived not through individual strength, but through group membership. And the price of that membership was conformity. You mirrored the group's beliefs, behaviors, and boundaries, or you were cast out. That wiring didn't disappear. It's still active, still controlling behavior, still deciding who belongs and who gets pushed to the edge. And intelligence, real intelligence, doesn't conform. It questions, it observes, it refuses to nod along. That makes you an outlier, and outliers get punished. The group doesn't need you to be smart. It needs you to be predictable. When you fall in line, laugh at the same jokes, repeat the same talking points, agree with the same conclusions, you signal loyalty, you signal safety. But when you think independently, when you arrive at different conclusions, when you challenge the collective narrative, you signal danger, not to yourself, to the group's identity. Because group identity is fragile. It's held together by shared agreement, and every time you deviate, you weaken that bond. So the group responds the only way it knows how. It applies pressure, subtle at first, then aggressive, until you either conform or leave. I've watched brilliant people dull themselves just to stay in the room. They soften their language, hide their insights, pretend not to notice what's obvious. Because the cost of being seen as different is higher than the cost of being silent. The brain calculates this unconsciously. It weighs belonging against authenticity, and belonging almost always wins. But when you refuse to shrink, when you keep your edge even under pressure, the group makes a decision. You're not one of us. And once that label sticks, isolation becomes inevitable. Not because you failed, because you refused to fail on their terms. But this pressure to conform isn't applied equally. Some environments tolerate independent thought, others annihilate it on contact. The brain is lazy. That's not judgment, it's design. The human mind burns through enormous amounts of energy just to function, so it defaults to efficiency. It prefers patterns over analysis, shortcuts over depth, ease over effort. When you speak in nuance, when you introduce variables, when you refuse to reduce complex ideas into digestible sound bites, you're asking the brain to work. And most brains resist that demand. They don't want to think harder. They want to think less. That's why simplicity wins. Not because it's better, because it's easier. You've felt this resistance. You explain something layered, something that requires context and careful thought. And halfway through you see it. Their eyes glaze over. They're not listening anymore. They're waiting for the summary, the headline, the version that requires no mental effort. And when you don't give it to them, they disengage. Not because they're incapable of understanding, because understanding requires energy they're not willing to spend. So they label you overcomplicating, overthinking too intense. It's not about your delivery. It's about their unwillingness to meet you at that level. This is why shallow content dominates. Why slogans spread faster than arguments. Why people prefer being told what to think over being shown how to think. Depth is exhausting. It forces the brain to hold multiple ideas in tension, to suspend certainty, to tolerate ambiguity. Most people won't do that. They want clarity, even if it's false. They want answers, even if they're incomplete. And when you offer complexity instead, you become the problem. Not because you're wrong, because you're inconvenient. And convenience is the currency of modern thought. But this preference for ease over depth isn't just cultural. It's rooted in something older, something tied to survival itself. Intelligence has always been a survival tool, but not just for the individual, for the group. And in early human tribes, power was distributed carefully. Too much concentrated in one person meant unpredictability, meant potential betrayal, meant someone who could manipulate, outmaneuver, or overthrow the established order. Intelligence wasn't just respected, it was monitored, because smart minds could shift alliances, decode social dynamics, exploit weaknesses others didn't see. And that made them dangerous. The same evolutionary wiring that kept tribes cautious of cunning individuals is still active today. You're not just smart, you're a potential threat to the power structure. This isn't conscious. No one sits down and thinks, this person is too intelligent, I must neutralize them. But the brain does it automatically. It reads intelligence as a form of dominance, and dominance triggers competition. The person with sharper reasoning, better foresight, deeper insight, they hold an invisible advantage. They can predict outcomes others miss. They can influence without force. They can control through understanding. And control, even subtle control, is power. Power that others didn't grant you. Power you took by simply being more capable. That threatens the balance. So the group responds by limiting your influence, questioning your motives, or isolating you entirely. This is why intelligence often correlates with loneliness. You're not isolated because you're antisocial. You're isolated because your capacity for independent thought makes you ungovernable. You don't need the group's narratives to navigate reality. You can build your own maps. And that autonomy is terrifying to those who depend on collective certainty. They see you as someone who could leave, who could lead others away, who could dismantle the consensus they rely on. So they keep you at arm's length, not out of malice, out of instinct. The same instinct that kept early humans wary of the one who thought too differently. But not every environment reacts to intelligence the same way. Some spaces tolerate it, others crush it immediately. Not all groups fear intelligence equally. Some environments reward depth, precision, independent thought. Others annihilate it on contact. The difference isn't random, it's structural. Low complexity environments, places built on rigid hierarchy, unquestioned authority, or emotional cohesion over competence, have zero tolerance for minds that operate outside the script. You walk in with questions, with nuance, with refusal to accept surface-level explanations, and you're marked immediately, not as valuable, as disruptive. Because these spaces don't want thinkers, they want followers, and you don't follow well. I've seen people thrive in one setting and suffocate in another, not because they changed, but because the environment did. In high-performance spaces, research labs, strategic firms, creative studios built on merit, intelligence is currency. It's rewarded, leveraged, respected. But in bureaucratic systems, social cliques, or ideologically rigid groups, intelligence is friction. It slows things down. It asks why when the answer is supposed to be obvious. It exposes inefficiencies, challenges assumptions, refuses to pretend mediocrity is excellence. And that kind of honesty doesn't survive long in places where appearances matter more than outcomes. This is why context matters more than people admit. You're not too smart for the world. You're too smart for certain rooms. And those rooms will make you feel like the problem. They'll gaslight you into thinking your clarity is arrogance, your precision is coldness, your refusal to settle is difficulty. But the truth is simpler. They need you to be less so they can remain comfortable. And when you refuse, they'll push you out. Not because you failed, because you refused to fail quietly. The system didn't reject you. It rejected what you represent: accountability, complexity, and the refusal to pretend. But even within hostile environments, the experience of rejection isn't universal. Some intelligent people integrate smoothly. Others are exiled instantly. Isolation doesn't happen because you're unlikable. It happens because you're incompatible with the system. One-on-one, people might respect you, even admire you. They'll seek your advice, value your insight, admit privately that you see things they don't. But the moment you're placed in a group setting, the dynamic shifts. Suddenly, you're not just an individual. You're a variable that disrupts the equilibrium. The group has unspoken rules, invisible hierarchies, silent agreements about what can and cannot be said. And you, by nature, violate those agreements, not through malice, through existence. Group dynamics operate on consensus and conformity. Your value in a group isn't measured by how right you are, but by how aligned you are. When you introduce perspectives that challenge the collective comfort, you become structural friction. The group doesn't reject you because of who you are. It rejects you because of what your presence does to the system. You make conversations harder. You make decisions slower. You make people think when they'd rather react. And groups optimize for efficiency, not accuracy. So they isolate the source of disruption. That source is you. Not because you're wrong, because you make the machine work harder. This is why you can be respected individually, but rejected collectively. The contradiction isn't hypocrisy, it's structure. People know you're valuable, but they also know you're expensive. Expensive in terms of cognitive effort, emotional discomfort, and social risk. So they keep you at a distance, they'll consult you in private, but exclude you from the table. They'll credit your ideas without crediting you. They'll benefit from your clarity while ensuring you never gain influence. Because influence would mean disruption at scale. And systems protect themselves from disruption even when disruption is exactly what they need. But not every intelligent person experiences this isolation. Some navigate groups effortlessly, and the difference isn't intelligence, it's willingness to compromise. There are intelligent people who never feel isolated. They move through groups easily, maintain friendships, get promoted, stay liked. And the reason is simple. They've learned to manage their intelligence. They soften it. They hide the sharper edges. They know when to speak and when to stay silent. They translate their insights into language the group can digest without discomfort. They've mastered the art of being smart enough to be useful, but not so smart that they threaten the balance. They've made peace with invisibility, and that peace keeps them safe. You haven't. You refuse to dull yourself for comfort. You won't pretend ignorance to preserve harmony. You won't nod along when the logic doesn't hold. And that refusal is what isolates you, not your intelligence. your unwillingness to manage it. The people who integrate smoothly have made a calculation. Belonging is worth more than honesty. They've traded intellectual authenticity for social survival, and it works. They're included, valued, protected by the group, but they're also constrained. They can't push too hard, question too deeply, or deviate too far. They've accepted a ceiling in exchange for a floor. You rejected that trade. You chose clarity over comfort, and that choice comes with consequences. Isolation, misunderstanding, being labeled difficult, cold, arrogant. But it also comes with something else: autonomy. You're not bound by the group's need for consensus. You're not trapped in their narratives. You think independently, act independently, and carry the weight of that independence alone. Most people can't handle that weight. They need the group to validate their reality. You don't, and that makes you rare, not broken, rare. But this path, this refusal to shrink, forces you into a dilemma that most people never have to face. Every day, people make the same choice without realizing it: comfort or growth. Stay in the familiar or step into the unknown. Protect the ego or challenge it. And the vast majority choose comfort. Not because they're weak, because comfort is seductive. It promises safety, belonging, predictability. It whispers that you're fine as you are, that questioning is exhausting, that certainty feels better than doubt. So they stop growing. They stop questioning. They build walls around their beliefs and call it wisdom. And inside those walls they feel secure, until someone like you shows up and reminds them how small those walls really are. You didn't choose comfort. You chose expansion. You chose the discomfort of not knowing, the tension of uncertainty, the isolation of outgrowing the people around you. Growth demands sacrifice. It demands that you abandon old beliefs when they no longer serve. It demands that you sit with complexity, with contradiction, with the uncomfortable truth that most of what you were taught is incomplete. And that process is lonely, because the people who chose comfort can't follow you there. They see your growth as judgment, your questions as attacks, your refusal to settle as arrogance. They don't understand that you're not rejecting them. You're rejecting stagnation. This is the real divide. Not intelligence versus ignorance, expansion versus preservation. The world runs on preservation. It rewards those who maintain the status quo, who don't rock the boat, who accept the boundaries they're given. But you're wired differently. You see boundaries as suggestions. You see limits as challenges. You see comfort as the slow death of potential. And that makes you incompatible with a world that worships safety. They call it balance. You call it surrender. And neither side is wrong. But only one side keeps moving forward. The question becomes, how do you operate in a world that fears what you represent without losing what makes you dangerous? Stop chasing validation from people who can't comprehend your operating system. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to understand everything. And there's a massive difference. When you seek approval, you hand control to others. You let them define your worth, measure your value, decide if you're enough. And they'll never say yes. Not because you're lacking, because their approval is a moving target designed to keep you dependent. The moment you stop needing it, you reclaim power. Not loud power, quiet, unshakable power. The kind that doesn't need an audience. Understanding doesn't require consensus. It requires clarity. You don't need people to agree with you to know you're right. You don't need their validation to trust your perception. You've done the work. You've tested the logic. You've observed the patterns. And if they can't see what you see, that's not your failure, it's theirs. But most people confuse rejection with incorrectness. They think if the group doesn't approve, they must be wrong. So they adjust. They soften. They seek common ground until they've compromised so much of their clarity that nothing sharp remains. You can't afford that erosion. This shift from approval-seeking to understanding-focused is where isolation becomes strength. You stop performing for an audience that never understood the script. You stop explaining yourself to people who aren't listening. You operate from your own center of gravity, guided by logic, observation, and consequence, not by whether it makes you likable. And that detachment terrifies people, because they can't manipulate what they can't guilt, shame, or flatter. You become ungovernable. And ungovernable minds don't fit in systems built on obedience, so they isolate you further. Let them. Isolation isn't rejection, it's filtration. But if you're going to operate outside the need for approval, you'll need something most people don't have: the right circle. Crowds dilute. They demand compromise, shallow agreement, lowest common denominator thinking. You can't build real power in spaces where depth is punished and conformity is rewarded. Power grows in selective circles, small, intentional, built on mutual respect for competence, not comfort. These aren't friendships based on proximity or convenience. They're alliances based on capacity. You don't need 100 people who tolerate you. You need 3 who challenge you. 3 who operate at your level or beyond. 3 who don't flinch when you speak the truth they've been avoiding. Most people collect connections like trophies. They measure worth by how many people show up, how many respond, how large their network is. But size is a weakness disguised as strength. The bigger the circle, the more energy you waste managing expectations, navigating egos, pretending to care about things that don't matter. Selective circles operate differently. Everyone pulls weight. Everyone contributes value. No one is there for validation. They're there for growth, strategy, clarity. These are the people who sharpen you, who don't need you to soften your observations or explain your silence, who understand that respect isn't given. It's earned through consistency, competence, and refusal to waste time. I've seen brilliant people waste years trying to fix broken circles, trying to elevate people who don't want to rise, trying to force depth into shallow spaces. It doesn't work. You can't build upward with people who are committed to staying low, and the energy you spend trying to drag them up is energy stolen from your own expansion. Let them go. Build smaller. Build sharper. Surround yourself with people who don't need to be convinced of your value because they operate at a frequency where value is obvious. That's not elitism. That's survival. But even within the right circle, there's a skill most intelligent people neglect, one that determines whether you lead or alienate. Intelligence without translation is just noise. You can see 10 layers deep, recognize patterns others miss, hold contradictions in perfect tension. But if you can't make it digestible, you lose influence. Not because your ideas are wrong, because people can't access them, and inaccessible intelligence becomes irrelevant intelligence. This isn't about dumbing yourself down. It's about strategic communication. You don't shrink your thinking, you sharpen your delivery. You learn to present complexity in stages, to guide someone from surface to depth without overwhelming their processing capacity. That's control. That's manipulation in its purest form. Most intelligent people fail here. They present the entire architecture at once, assumptions, variables, exceptions, implications, and wonder why people glaze over or push back. You're not teaching. you're drowning them. The brain can only hold so much in working memory before it shuts down. So you feed it in pieces. You start with the conclusion. You anchor their attention. Then you walk them backward through the logic, one step at a time, letting them feel like they're arriving at the insight themselves. That's how you embed ideas. Not by proving you're right, by making them believe they discovered it. This skill separates those who are smart from those who are effective. You can be the most capable person in the room and still lose the room if you can't manage cognitive load. Learn to read when complexity is welcome and when it's friction. Learn to adjust your language, your pacing, your depth based on who's listening. Not to please them, to penetrate their defenses. Because the goal isn't to be understood, it's to be influential. And influence requires meeting people where they are, then pulling them toward where you need them to be. Slowly, deliberately, without them realizing they've been moved. But translation alone won't protect you. There's another dimension, one that determines whether people see you as cold or just controlled. Empathy isn't weakness, it's reconnaissance. You don't need to feel what others feel. You need to understand it well enough to predict their behavior. Strategic empathy isn't about compassion. It's about mapping the emotional terrain so you can navigate it without getting trapped in it. Most intelligent people reject empathy entirely because they see it as irrational, manipulative, beneath them. That's arrogance disguised as logic. You're not above emotion, you're just operating from a different framework. And if you can't read that framework in others, you're blind to half the battlefield. People don't make decisions based on logic. They make decisions based on how they feel, then reverse engineer the logic to justify it. If you ignore that process, you lose influence. You present perfect reasoning and watch it get rejected because you didn't account for fear, pride, insecurity, or ego. Strategic empathy means you observe those variables without being controlled by them. You notice when someone's resistance isn't about your argument, it's about their need to feel competent. You see when silence isn't agreement, it's suppressed resentment, and you adjust, not to manipulate them, to communicate effectively, because clarity without awareness is just talking to yourself. This doesn't mean you perform empathy. You don't fake concern or pretend to care about things that don't matter. That's detectable, and it erodes trust. What you do is observe, map, and calibrate. You recognize that every person operates from a set of fears, desires, and boundaries. And when you speak in ways that respect those boundaries, not by avoiding truth, but by framing it in ways they can receive, you gain access. Access to influence, access to trust, access to spaces where most intelligent people get locked out because they mistook coldness for strength. But even with the right skills, the right circle, and the right approach, there's one reality you can't escape. Solitude isn't what happens when you fail socially. It's what happens when you succeed intellectually. The sharper you become, the fewer people can keep up. The deeper you think, the lonelier the terrain. And that's not a flaw in you. It's a feature of the path. Most people experience loneliness as rejection. You need to reframe it as filtration. Every person who falls away, every group that excludes you, every space that feels too small, it's not loss. It's refinement. You're not being pushed out. You're being elevated out. And elevation is always isolating. The masses operate at sea level, comfortable, crowded, predictable. But you're climbing. And the higher you go, the thinner the air, the colder the temperature, the fewer the companions. That's not punishment. That's physics. You can't expect the same social dynamics at altitude that exist at the base. The people who stay with you here aren't the ones who liked you when you were easy. They're the ones who respect you because you're difficult. Difficult to manipulate. Difficult to deceive. Difficult to break. And those people are rare. So solitude becomes the norm. Not because you're broken, because you're selective. I've watched people try to escape solitude by lowering their standards, by rejoining groups they've outgrown, by pretending they don't see what they see just to feel connected again. It never works. You can't unsee clarity. You can't unlearn pattern recognition. You can't reverse intellectual expansion. So you either accept solitude as part of the cost, or you spend your life resenting the price of your own growth. The choice is simple. One path leads to bitterness, the other leads to mastery. And mastery is always earned alone. But solitude isn't the final destination. It's preparation for something most people will never understand about you. Control is the foundation of every social structure. Governments, corporations, religions, families, they all function by managing behavior, limiting thought, and rewarding compliance. And they do it well. Most people don't even realize they're being controlled because the system makes obedience feel like choice. But you see it. You see the scripts people follow without questioning, the beliefs they adopt because everyone else did, the boundaries they accept because challenging them feels too risky. And the moment you refuse to follow those scripts, you become a problem. Not because you're dangerous, because you're uncontrollable. Uncontrollable minds can't be predicted. They can't be guilted into submission. They can't be shamed into silence. They operate from internal logic, not external pressure. And that makes them a structural threat to any system that depends on compliance. You don't need to rebel loudly. You don't need to fight the system directly. Your existence alone, your refusal to bend, to conform, to accept narratives that don't hold up under scrutiny, is rebellion enough. And systems respond to that rebellion the only way they know how: isolation, marginalization, suppression. They'll label you difficult, extreme, unreasonable. They'll frame your independence as arrogance, your clarity as coldness. Let them. Because the alternative is worse. The alternative is surrendering your autonomy for the illusion of belonging, trading your mind for acceptance, becoming predictable, manageable, safe. And safe minds don't build anything worth remembering. They maintain, they preserve, they survive, but they don't create, they don't disrupt, they don't evolve. You were never built for maintenance. You were built to see what others can't, think what others won't, and act when others freeze. That capacity makes you dangerous, and the world will always fear what it can't control. The question is whether you'll shrink to ease that fear, or expand in spite of it. You now know what they won't tell you. Intelligence isn't celebrated, it's contained. Your clarity isn't admired, it's feared, and that fear will never disappear. It will follow you into every room, every conversation, every relationship where you refuse to dim yourself for their comfort. The world doesn't reward sharp minds. It isolates them. It labels them. It pushes them to the edges where they can't disrupt the carefully maintained illusions that keep the masses asleep. But isolation isn't weakness. It's filtration. Every person who couldn't handle your depth, every group that excluded you, every space that felt too small, they weren't rejecting you. They were revealing themselves. You didn't lose anything. You gained clarity. And clarity is the only currency that matters when you're building power in silence. Most people will spend their entire lives seeking approval from those who fear them. You won't. You'll seek understanding. You'll build selectively. You'll translate your complexity into influence and wield strategic empathy like reconnaissance. You'll accept solitude not as punishment, but as proof that you're operating at a frequency most can't reach. And you'll do it without apology. Because the world fears what it can't control, and you were never built to be controlled. But intelligence without confidence is just potential. And if you don't know how to carry that intelligence with the kind of presence that makes people step back instinctively, you're still giving them power. Watch the previous video. The confidence that intimidates, Machiavelli demanded it. You need that framework. You need to understand how confidence becomes dominance, how silence becomes authority, how presence becomes control. That video completes what this one started. Watch it now. Write in the comments. Fear is confirmation. The world will always fear what it can't control. Make sure you're worth fearing.